live in a very rural place in the UK, and everyone just about knows everyone else there, and there's only like 200 people living there, and most are either family or family friends. Anyone you don't know personally, you'll still see pretty regularly, so yeah, fairly rural. So, when I was around 9, I first learned how to ride a bicycle, and I would bike around for hours after primary school when I learned fully. At this time, it was around October, so the days were slowly getting shorter. There was also a letter going around at the time to all the parents from my school saying that a black Mercedes driving around had been offering to take kids home. Obviously, this put everyone in panic mode, and there were only about 50 students at my school, so everyone's parents looked out for each other. Well, I went out for one of my little bike adventures at around 6 p.m. as I'd finished my dinner. I went down the road towards my local shop, which is only about 50 feet away from my house, and I see this black car pull up near the shop and right up against me. He parks for a few seconds, and I run into the shop to just stay out of sight. This man had to be in his mid-30s. He had a shaved head and was wearing a sort of ripped Adidas hoodie, and that's all I can remember. And while I picked up a chocolate bar, he came up next to me and picked up the same chocolate bar, and when I went up to the counter, he told the shop owner that he was paying for me and put £150 on the counter. Well, luckily, the shop owner knows my mum and dad, and so asked if I was going upstairs to see her son and play with him on the Xbox. She didn't have a son, but I got the idea quickly. So I said yes and turned to the left and walked towards the door which enters to her part of the shop, which is her house. I went through, but looked through the small window by peeking. The guy loitered around for a bit, and I could make out what he was saying, just barely. The shop owner kept asking if he was leaving as it was closing time, and he said, "I'm waiting for my son." She said that she would drop me off, and he got a bit aggressive and just stormed out. I'm not sure if the guy was ever arrested or if anything happened to him, and he might have just moved village to the next targets. All I can say is that I safely biked home about 20 minutes after this, and I rushed into my house and told my mum. After bringing this up again too, I tried to find anything online that could be given to show you all, but unfortunately, due to the nature of where I live, I couldn't find anything. "13 to 14 years ago, when I was around 12 or 13, my family had a gathering at my grandma's house, which we did pretty often back then. My brother, cousins, both boys, and I, a girl, were playing in the inflatable pools in the backyard. The neighbour kid, probably my brother's age, 15 or 16, climbed his fence so that he could talk to us. We were having fun joking and chatting with him, so we asked if he wanted to join us. My grandma gave the okay, and he came over to partake in the festivities, and everything was great until my cousins and brother went inside to help with something. I got nervous when they left, but I am a socially anxious person who is especially nervous around guys, so I tried to just push it aside. But suddenly, the cool kid from next door became a jerk. He started hurling insults at me while grinning, and I figured that he was just playing around, so I did it back. We started splashing each other, but then he got super aggressive. He was splashing me so much that I kept taking in water, in fact. I turned my head away and told him to slow down, still kind of laughing, but when he didn't, I got serious and told him to just knock it off, and he stopped. I was clearing my eyes when he grabbed a bucket. He filled it with water and put the bucket on my head. I went to take it off, but he shoved me down, and I got the bucket off and asked what the hell was wrong with him, and he just grabbed me and shoved my head under the water. I was flailing, searching for his face to scratch it or hit it, but the angle he was at made it impossible. I got dangerously close to passing out when he was pulled off me. I came up gasping for air, and my brother pulled me behind him and asked the kid what the hell he was doing. The little douche snickered and said that he was just playing. My brother stepped forward and asked how trying to drown me is playing, and the kid kept smirking, and my brother told him that he needs to stay away from us. The kid scoffed and angrily said, "You guys are boring anyway," and was escorted out by my sibling. We never said anything to the adults for reasons that I still don't understand, but the kid kept taunting us in his own backyard. He even brought one of his friends to mock us and insult us, which resulted in us telling our family, so that stopped pretty quickly. He tried to call us liars, but wasn't believed, and shortly after that, the family moved and we never dealt with him again. I'm really grateful for my brother who essentially raised me, and he's helped me in more ways than I can count, and honestly, I don't know where I'd be without him. But I can say one thing for sure. If he hadn't have stepped in that day, I wouldn't be here. So this happened when I was 18 at my last year in high school. My school was located in a really boring residential area, and it's actually a pretty wealthy neighborhood, but it didn't appeal to teenagers looking for stuff to do, and this is important to the following events. Me and my friends, we would usually go to a store and buy cheap alcohol in order to get wasted while walking down the streets. Yeah, I'm not proud of those days either. If we had the energy, sometimes we would go to this park of sorts to get some privacy. We were always worried about getting caught by the school and having our parents called. This said park had basically 3 layers. It had a lake in the center, in the middle a running field, and woods enveloping it all. We would obviously get in between the trees and get our teenager asses drunk. We were out of school's reach and we didn't have to worry about anything, except some occasional park staff and some weirdos lurking by, but we were never in less than 5, so no problem. Surprisingly, this is not a drunk regret story, though I have many, mind you. I just wanted to get that clear because we didn't have many places to do private stuff at the time, and my options were limited. This became a problem when I got my first girlfriend too. It was already pretty damn awkward just existing in front of each other, even worse engaging in all the processes of making out, especially inside the school buildings where anyone could simply catch you in the act. So, a simple, "Hey, let's have a date at the park today," was the perfect solution in my mind. Immediately upon arrival, we started to search for obscure places. As we found one, we got to our business. It was going quite well, and even though we had to occasionally stop due to people getting close while passing by, in one of those situations, we heard some footsteps and immediately stopped. After they ceased, we got back to kissing, but then I decided to open my eyes and look around a bit. Yeah, I'm one of those. Only to see a weirdo statically looking at us from about 15 meters away. I suddenly stopped and stared back at the guy, hoping that he would just go away, but he didn't. Instead, he waves and starts walking toward us. As he does it, my mind is flooded with the until now forgotten memories of people saying how shady that place was. Stuff like huge drug deals, stalkers, and people up to no good being there. After the awkward walk in our direction, the guy starts talking to us, and he looked like he was in his mid-40s. He was bald and was wearing a regular outfit, and he looked like the everyday man you would see in the street, but I can't remember his face too well. Jen and I were clearly nervous, and the man pulled something like, "So, hey there, having a good time, huh? I myself used to get here with the cuties back in the day," and then proceeded to ask information like where we live and where we study. A pattern in these situations, apparently. I lied, saying that we were from the neighborhood, but told the truth about our school. And he continued with, "Really sorry to interrupt your fun, but I just couldn't go without telling you that the park patrol uses passers-by here this time, and if they caught you, they're probably going to call your school." It was fishy, no doubt, but then he made a suggestion and said, I know a quiet place around here. Used it myself sometimes. Come on, I'll show you." And then started walking, signing us to follow. And yes, I know you probably would have had the balls to have stood up to this guy and asked him to go away, but for us it was just so sudden and fast that we didn't know actually what was happening, so We just followed the creep. The realization, though, that we had screwed up came at the middle of the walk to the place, though, and we were silently panicking. After non-literal centuries of walking, we finally arrived at the place. It was a giant concrete pipe in an isolated playground, apparently used like a tunnel by the kids. The guy said more crap about his glory days and finally left. I remember starting to think that the guy was just extremely weird, but with actual good intentions since he actually left. I was not about to put our lives at stake though, and as soon as the man disappeared, I told Jen that we had to go, and she agreed quietly. Jen is very introverted and quiet, so even this time I could see that she was extremely uncomfortable though. Before leaving, I had this feeling that the creep might still be around, so we hid in a bush and waited. And boy, was I right. Almost instantly after we had hid, the guy creeped out of the tree and stealthily approached the playground. And we freaked out. We were in that classic scene covering our mouths and looking through the bushes, and we thought that he saw us since he was approaching us, but he didn't. As he arrives in the playground, he starts peeping into the big pipe, and when he finds no one there, he leaves again. This was the moment when everything just made sense to me. He lured us to this isolated place to get us in the act. But why though? What would he have done if we were in there? Well, we were not staying there to find out, so we rushed to get away, and at the beginning, we were just fast walking, but then the guy spawned out of nowhere in front of us and asked why we were leaving. I didn't even let the guy finish his sentence and said, "We just gotta leave," and then we just started running till we were far enough away. It was a really weird and creepy experience, and still to this day, I don't really know the intentions of the creep. I went back to the park sometimes for various reasons too, and never saw the guy again. But I never saw that patrol that he alerted us about either, so I assumed that he was really up to no good. Anyway, I've learned my lesson that no matter how much my hormones burn now, I'm only doing this at home. For some background, I live in a nice area where the only crimes are teenagers smoking weed occasionally, so nothing really happens here. I'm 17 now, but when this happened, I was about 13 and my sister was 11. We were riding bikes in our neighborhood, and we'd ridden around for like 20 or 30 minutes and decided to turn around and go home. At this point, we're probably 5 minutes from our house, and suddenly, my sister's tire catches on a rock and she's flung off her bike. She's sobbing and holds up her finger, and her entire nail on her right index finger had more or less come off. It looks incredibly painful, so obviously we realized that we needed to get home immediately and have Mum clean it up. So we start walking our bikes the rest of the way home, and my sister is still crying. We walk for maybe 30 seconds, and a lawn care company van pulls up to the path we're on, and the guy sitting in the passenger seat hops out. So you can paint a better picture of this story. He has a handlebar mustache and appears to be Latino. He clearly had seen my sister in distress and asked us if we needed a ride home. Little me can hear the stranger danger signals in the back of my mind, and I say no thanks, we live right over there, and I pointed in the general direction of my house. The man insisted on at least walking us there, after the little argument about riding in the van, which I was not going to do. He was really pushy, even when I kept saying that we were fine and didn't want help. He also continuously asked if my parents were home, and I kept saying yes. And when I said yes, he'd be like, "Are you sure? How long has it been since you were home? Maybe they left." I figured it would be fine because I knew my parents were actually home, and if this guy really did walk us home, my dad could make an appearance. Eventually, we were on the street leading up to our house, and I said one more time that we were fine. But what freaked me out this entire time was the fact that the guy had not gotten out of the van. He'd just driven slowly alongside us, and the man who was walking with us was also touching my sister's shoulders and giving us this creepy grin the entire way. I eventually just burst into tears due to the stress and the anxiety and told the man to just please go. We're almost home. I said I was grateful for his help as well, even though he didn't do anything, and I just wanted him to leave, and his face instantly screwed into somewhat of a grimace, and he got back into his car with his friend, and they both just began hysterically laughing and drove off. We made it home, and I didn't tell my mum, but I'm sure if I told her now that she'd be proud, because she always stressed to us that we should never talk to strangers. Thanks, Mum, for not letting me be a dumb kid. Okay, so about 3 years ago, I went on a holiday with my boyfriend and his family. It was lovely, and it was long hot days on the beach, exploring the cities, swimming in the ocean, but I'm thinking of one particular night. My boyfriend and I, we had hung out with his stepsister most of the holiday. She's a year younger than us and likes getting drunk. Despite the fact that she annoyed us by following us all the time, we still hung out with her. So, this one night, she suggests that we go and find a club. I state that me nor her are old enough, only my boyfriend could get in. But nonetheless, we're all walking to the other side of the island to get to this club. We're all pretty drunk, and I fell over several times along the journey. We finally get to this club, though, only to see that all the people are leaving it. We didn't realize it was around 2 a.m, and it looked like the club was shut. A bit disappointed, we look to the McDonald's and suggest that we refuel there. I go inside and order, but tell my boyfriend and his SS that I need some air. I go outside for a cigarette. I'm smoking when a black car pulls up into the taxi space on the road. I have the idea that we may as well get a taxi back. I mean, I am hurting from falling down and I am pretty drunk. So I ask this guy how much for a taxi to our hotel, and he replies with €10. Now, the problem was I only had €5. I said this to the man and asked if he would please drive us for 5. We're from the UK and we don't know here really well. So this man says, for you, €5. My boyfriend and his SS come out of the McDonald's with the food and they see me talking to this guy. I tell them that he's the taxi man and that he's taking us back. The taxi man is surprised to see them and he says he didn't know I was with friends, but come on, hop in. We're all about to get in the car, me and the SS in the back, boyfriend in the front, when the man requests that I sit in the front. I had wanted to sit in the front anyway, and me being very drunk and stupid, please forgive my lack of intelligence in this story, I decide to just comply and go in the front, despite my boyfriend's protests. So, for the first part of the journey, everything was good. We're all chatting and laughing together, and the taxi man is joining in too. We have music on the radio, and I'm looking out the window at the wonderful oceanside views. Plus, the cool air is nice on my hot drunken face. We all continue chatting away, and the taxi man is being friendly, asking us questions about the UK and just generally making conversation. We all start laughing and chatting away again, and he takes my hand, with his right hand on the wheel. Bear in mind, this man is probably about 50, very chatty, so I didn't think anything of it. He was just being friendly, I thought. Throughout our conversations, he's holding my hand every now and then, and I'm starting to feel a little uncomfortable, even if I am drunk, but shrug it off. But it progresses. He placed my hand on his thigh, holding it tight in his hand. I move over on my seat, away from him, but he keeps my hand there. I turn around and see the SS, and she mouths, "Are you okay?" And I nod, because the man has now let go of my hand. I see the SS whisper something to my boyfriend, and they go quiet for a minute. Seeing as he let go, the conversation continues, and I can see that we're getting closer to our hotel anyway, and I'm just wishing for us to get there quickly. The man, though, takes my hand again, and this time he places it on my thigh, his hand holding mine tightly. I'm feeling very vulnerable at this point. I mean, I'm wearing a short, tight vest dress, and I immediately clamp my legs together. I'm now silent. I froze, and my boyfriend notices and says, "Hey mate, take your hands off of her." The man laughs and says, "Friendly, I'm just being friendly," and he continues keeping his hand on my thigh. At this point, my boyfriend and his SS are saying stop it, pull over, but he says we're close to the hotel now. I feel sick and the alcohol is creeping up my stomach and throat. The man is still grasping my hand and he moves it further up my thigh. I'm completely stiff at this point, knowing that if I let my legs relax, even the slightest, things are definitely going to escalate. But they did anyway. He guided my hand up, and with one of his fingers, he touched me. I don't need to say where because I think you already know. I stare out the window and I'm begging for this car to stop, and luckily, it does. I jump out of the car and my boyfriend and the SS are looking at me, and I say he touched me. My boyfriend races over to the driver's side, shouting and screaming at the guy, but the man speeds off really fast, and as he does, my boyfriend kicks his license plate and we see it dent. We go back into the hotel and, needless to say, I just drink some more. The next morning, we're going on a boat trip and my boyfriend's family are asking if I'm okay after hearing about what happened. I say yes because, well, it's true. It's over now and could have got a lot worse, and I hope that I just never see the guy again. We leave the hotel lobby and that's when I see them. The taxis, they're white, with a yellow taxi sign on top of them. They're pulled in the taxi ranks and I head over to one. I say excuse me to one of the taxi men and ask him if all the taxis are white here. And he replies with yes, only taxis coloured white with a sign on top. I feel my insides churning. Let me reiterate this for you guys so that you guys get the gist of it. A 50-year-old man thought me, a 17-year-old female, was alone and pretended to be a taxi service to get me in his car. When I first met the bagman, I was 16 and I didn't even think that he was anything to worry about at the time. He just passed me by while I was biking around in one of my city's forest preserves called Riverside. Riverside was always a place I could go when I was feeling stressed or anxious, so when I passed by this rugged-looking guy in the middle of the woods, I didn't think much of it, really. I had other things on my mind, and for all I knew, I could have looked pretty rugged myself, being all sweaty and wearing a black hoodie and biking around like a maniac. He and I were actually similarly dressed. I didn't have long to look at him as I was passing by on my bike pretty quickly, but he was wearing black sweatpants that were ripped in several places, along with muddy white shoes and a black hoodie which he wore with the hood down. I could also make out that he was a pretty big guy in all areas. He was fairly wide and was actually pretty tall too. His hair was brown and down to his shoulders, and I couldn't really make out his face at the time, but little did I know that I would see it in a few weeks. When he saw me coming towards him on my bike, he held up his hand all excitedly and waved at me and then began to jog while I got closer. I thought at the time that maybe he was out there exercising like me and seeing me made him remember to start running again or something. But as I passed him, he got so close to me that my bike almost bumped into him. I had to swerve a little to the right to try and avoid him, barely missing him too. And when I passed him, I kind of heard him shout something back at me, but I couldn't really understand what it was because I had my headphones in. I shrugged the situation off as I continued to bike back to my car, and it took me a few minutes to get back to the parking lot, and I was pretty exhausted as I loaded my bike into the back of my minivan. Once I closed the trunk, I looked around for a moment to see if the guy that I had seen earlier was around. I didn't see him, but the only other car that was parked there was directly across from me and on the other side of the lot. It was a long white van, like the stereotypical pedophile vans you see in movies, and it was dirty and muddy like the man driving it, and the windows were tinted so you couldn't really see inside. Thinking back on this situation now, it could have been totally possible too that the bagman followed behind me all the way back to the parking lot and had gotten into this creepy van before I could see him and was in there while I was staring at the vehicle. He could have been watching me through those dark windows and I didn't even know. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I made sure that the van stayed in its place as I passed by and drove home, and that was my first encounter with the bagman. But obviously, that meeting isn't what gave him his name. A little over 3 weeks later after my experience at Riverside, I was home alone and it was approximately 4 p.m. I was watching YouTube on my phone or something while laying in bed upstairs in my room, and my dog was next to me and we were both just chilling until my dad came home from work. While I was up to go to the bathroom, I heard the doorbell ring and then 2 loud bangs on the door. Now, usually, when someone pounded on the door like that, it was almost always my mum because she, for some reason, likes to freak out the dog when she gets home, and a few loud bangs on the door would do the job. So, my dog went running out of my room and tore down the steps to get to the front door. I followed behind him, but I didn't really feel like running, so I was slow. When I finally got to the door, though, I swung it open expecting to see my mum, and it wasn't her. It was the guy from the Riverside. He was just standing there with a big black garbage bag in his hand, and he was wearing almost the same outfit that he was wearing when I saw him last, except his shoes were all clean now. I looked up at his face and saw that he had a poorly trimmed beard that covered most of his face, and his eyes were bright blue and they stared down at me. He spoke before I had a chance to say anything, and this will be a rough paraphrase of what he said, as I don't remember exactly. He said something like, "Hi there, young man. Is Melanie around? I'd love to see her." I said, "No, I don't know who that is, sorry." But I actually knew who he was asking for because she actually lived a few houses down. I think at that point I had given him a kind of smile to try and act like I wasn't completely freaked out. You see, I always park my minivan out right in front of my house, so it's always in view whenever I'm home. And this means that he probably recognized it and me. And as if on cue, he said, "I think I know you from somewhere, pal." His voice was deep and haunting and just kind of left me stunned. I stood there and didn't say anything and shrugged my shoulders. And that's when he started to shake that bag. I don't really know how else to describe what he was doing apart from the fact that he was just shaking the bag up and down. I never actually saw what was inside, but it sounded like a whole bunch of metal cookie cutters rattling around. The contents were poking and stretching the bag out in weird angles, and he was still staring at me as he shook the bag an inch closer to me. He said, "Are you sure you don't know where Melanie is?" He continued to shake the bag as he got closer and closer until we were nearly touching. My breath was shaky and I was looking down at the ground like a dog that had just gotten in trouble for peeing on the couch or something, and then I snapped and pushed him away from me as hard as I could. His skin was flabby and soft and his shirt felt really greasy. I used all my strength to get him away from me, and I didn't look back as I did a 180 and sped back into my house, slamming the door once I was back inside. I could hear him pound his heavy arms against the door and the clamoring of whatever was in that bag. He banged on the door for maybe another 30 seconds before he stopped abruptly, and I quickly sped towards the window to see if he was still standing there, and as I moved to the side to get a better angle of the doorway, I saw him looking straight back at me. When we met eyes, he immediately started running back to his van, which was parked across the street. I recognized it as the same one from Riverside. I was disappointed to see that there weren't any front license plate numbers, but as the van started to move and pass my house, I took down the numbers and the letters that were on the back of the van. I still have them written down on my phone, in fact. Since that incident, I haven't seen the man, and and I notified Melanie that some strange man was asking around for her. She said that she had no idea who he might be, and that she would tell her parents to look out for anyone that looked like who I had seen, just in case he managed to find a house or something. But it doesn't end there too. About a year later, my mum and I were out having lunch, and she was scrolling through Facebook when she came upon a post from a woman who lived in the neighbourhood next to ours. The woman wrote that a man driving a white van drove up to her house and knocked on the door, which her young daughter answered. The man had apparently asked her to get into his van because he had the circus in there. Apparently, the mum came to the door in time before anything had happened, but the man was still being super creepy. Unfortunately, the woman didn't post a description of the man, but she definitely remembered the white van. Now, I don't know exactly what the circus means, but I'm almost positive that it's the same man that visited my house. And I'm pretty sure that he's still out there preying on people, because just yesterday on the local news, they interviewed a 9-year-old girl who was approached by a man driving a white van. So please, if you live in the central Illinois area of the US, look out for anyone or anything matching what I said in my story. This creep is most likely still out there because he keeps coming up on social media and the news. Stay safe, everyone.